Women over 55 are the fastest growing group facing homelessness. That has been the case for some time. Since between 2011 and 2021, the number of women going into homelessness increased by over 40%, and that's why they're called the fastest growing group. Another friend was sleeping in somebody's garage. And you know, look, it was a garage that was done up as a bedroom, but the garage itself didn't have any heating or hot water. And my friend offered her a shower at their place, and the lady came out and was crying because that was the first time in a long time that she'd had that. And I tell you what, this is not in the slums in some third world country. This is happening in areas that we think are really rich and where there's a lot of wealth. So it's really, I find it really appalling, actually, and we're allowing this to happen.
G'day, folks. Adam Gibson here with Parents with Questions. Today's episode is slightly different to what we normally talk about, but I think very, very important, particularly to our audience. We've got a lot of interaction, a lot of people in our Parents with Questions community who are a lot of women, a lot of females, a lot of mums, a lot of grandmas, and this is an issue or a topic that's relevant to every lady in the audience, but also something all of us can get involved with and take action on. And it's important. It's probably never been more pressing than ever before. And I've got a lady here today I'm very happy to, and someone I've known for a long time, actually, as a friend, who is doing something uniquely powerful around this emerging crisis in the Australian housing market. And it's around the crisis for women who are becoming increasingly in the cohort of people facing homelessness. And we'll unpack that now. But I'm joined today by Dionne Payn from Women for Homes. Dionne, thanks for joining our Parents with Questions humble little podcast here.
Thank you. Humble podcast, my arse. It's a great podcast.
Well, I don't like to get too carried away in the current media age. There's podcasts left, right and centre, and, you know, we do our little thing here. But look, Dionne, talk to me about the problem that I just alluded to, which, you know, when we first spoke a few weeks ago or reconnected again, you kind of highlighted this and I was vaguely aware of it, but it's not on the mainstream. It's not on the top of the headline of the paper. What is the hidden crisis around women and homelessness in Australia right now in the current environment?
Okay. Where I think the best place to start is just with the stark data. Women over 55 are the fastest growing group facing homelessness. That has been the case for some time. Since between 2011 and 2021, the number of women going into homelessness increased by over 40%, and that's why they're called the fastest growing group. I started looking at this problem about 18 months ago. I knew it existed. I had friends who were experiencing housing insecurity and homelessness in some cases. Women I know ended up leaving the country because they couldn't afford to live here, so they ended up going to Bali and cheaper places to live. So I knew that it was an issue, and particularly since the pandemic as well. But I didn't know really why. I had a sense of gender pay gap. That was something that was bandied around. But when I really looked into it, I just could see that it was a whole accumulation of issues that were causing the problem. So the gender pay gap, but what comes behind that is women taking time out of the workforce to raise families and not being adequately compensated for that. Then they take jobs to provide flexibility so they can work around the kids. And by the way, I was a stay-at-home mum, so it was the best part of my life seeing these little humans grow. So I wouldn't change it, but at the same time, I wish I'd have known some of the barriers that I would face as a result of that. So then you've got the flexibility of work, which either is work that isn't paid very well or is work because it's a reduced number of hours, there's not as much money coming in. And then, you know, a sickness or a divorce, and that can really tip women over the edge where they just don't have enough superannuation. So the beautiful thing about super is that you're putting money in all the time. It gets to compound. But if you're having career breaks for different reasons, then you're not putting that money in. So the money that might be in super is compounding, but it's just not compounding at the same rate as somebody that has an unbroken career history. And so when you put all of that together, it's really easy to see why women over 55 are in the situation that they're in. The other aspect to it is, and this is something that's sort of coming quite recently, is that, how long have we had the world of money in some way, shape, or form? Whether it was bartering or whether it was the little gold coins or, money that we see today. So money's been in our psyche for a really long time. But it was only since the early 70s that women were able to get access to financial products such as loans and credit cards without needing their husband's signature or their father's signature. The amount of time that women have been in control of money comparatively is very short. And so often I talk to people, and I've felt this myself, that feeling of, oh God, I'm really behind because I don't understand how to play this game of money. But actually, for women, I think that we can go a bit easier on ourselves because we haven't had it in our psyche for that long and we're playing catch up. So we're on a field where everybody else is, sort of on the 50-meter line, whereas we're on the 250-meter line or even further beyond that.
Yeah, that resonates entirely. It's not been it's a cultural thing, isn't it? It's like, well, it's not important. You focus on bringing up kids and raising a family and all those sort of things, and the money will take care of itself. The men will look after it or whatever. It's kind of a cultural thing, and that's playing out, I guess. And I think when I interviewed Jared Reddick some time ago before the last election, he spoke about this around how we're dissolving. The state is basically taking over trying to put people out to work and having kids in childcare and sort of how families aren't functioning the way they should. And I guess it's all, it plays, it's systemic is what probably where I'm going in a clumsy way. But we're not talking about, we're talking professional women and, people in otherwise sort of not people we typically think of as being at risk of homelessness. Is that a fair comment? We're not talking about, people who have maybe got addiction issues or living on the street to begin with. This is really falling off the cliff, the mainstream falling off that, crossing that homelessness gap, I guess. Is that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we do have a picture of what a homeless person should look like. And, they're a bit disheveled and, the clothes are raggedy and they're walking around with a shopping trolley. And that definitely does exist. And people do fall into that camp. But this burgeoning group of older women in homelessness, they're professional women. They've had professional careers. They're probably still, some of them are still in professional careers, but yeah, they're sleeping in their cars. They're washing in, facilities, and they're still going to work the same way. And nobody is any the wiser. And this is something that I've heard repeatedly. It's also happening to people that I know. I heard a story the other day. I was sharing what we were up to with a friend of mine, and she shared that a good friend of ours was, basically house sitting and going from house to house to house, property to property, because she didn't have somewhere to live. Another friend was sleeping in somebody's garage. And look, it was a garage that was done up as a bedroom, but the garage itself didn't have any heating or hot water. And my friend offered her a shower at their place, and the lady came out and was crying because that was the first time in a long time that she'd had that. And I tell you what, this is not in the slums in some third world country. This is happening in areas that we think are really rich and where there's a lot of wealth. So I find it really appalling, actually. We're allowing this to happen. It's funny as well, because in the last couple of weeks, I've been very intentional about sharing more about what we're doing on social media. And we've been getting some pushback, some comments like, well, it's their own fault and, housing is not a right. So you've got to work for it. And on one hand, those kind of comments where they're just nasty and toxic, I'm just blocking them, so that's fine. But on the other hand, I'm also recognizing that a lot of people are doing it tough and they don't really want to see one group singled out for preferential treatment. But my argument with that is if we have a system that has really pushed people to the edge and pushed people behind the eight ball, we have a responsibility to help them catch up. And when I think about older women, when I think about these are the women in our society that are the wisdom keepers, that should be handing down that wisdom to their grandkids, to the younger people in society. And they can't because they're struggling to, where are they going to sleep that night, or how are they going to pay the rent because they're already paying 80% of their income on rent. So you can't be giving wisdom when you're in that survival trap, right? So I think that if we can sort this out in older women, everybody is going to benefit from it. I don't think that anything that we're doing is exclusionary. It's really focusing on older women at the moment, and that is going to have a really beautiful effect for everybody else, a ripple effect. It's funny, we talk about trickle-down economics, where it's like, if we look after the rich, then it will trickle down to everybody else. I call bullshit on that. If we look after the older women, that will ripple out to everybody else, and that's where my focus is at the moment.
Yeah, something really deeply profound in what you just said there. I think just, the elders of the village, and, male and female, but, it's almost, we've just pushed them to the edge, and as you said, that, being excluded from a lot of aspects of society generally, and we are lacking, to your point, we're lacking that. We're lacking the wisdom of elders. We're lacking that sense of culture that's handed down, sense of place. And, as a result, we're caught up in social media and the fake world, whereas we really do need to reconnect with people who've lived and have lived experience and, can pass on stories and culture and those sort of things that keep us grounded and human. So I absolutely resonate with that. Why is this not front page of the paper? Why is this not on the headline all the time? Is there a gap why is it not more of a popular topic's not the right word, but why is it under-recognized? Because it sounds, when you talk about it, it sounds like something that happens overseas. That doesn't sound like Australia to me, not the Australia I grew up in. But it's clearly the case. Housing is so ridiculously unaffordable here now. But why is it not on the top of the media cycle?
You know what is on the top of the media cycle? All the things that are happening with property right now. So, talk about capital gains tax and the Labour Party saying they're going to, scrap the discount and scrap the negative gearing. And there's a lot of talk about that. There's a lot of talk about housing unaffordability and what that means for young people getting onto the market and, what that means for renters. So there's a lot of that, but this just seems like such a small part of the conversation. And I just don't think that anybody, it's not that it's not been talked about, but just in terms of the airtime that I think it deserves, I just don't think that it's there. And I wonder again if that's more of a systemic issue, not something I've really, really thought about. But as you've asked me the question, I'm just thinking, why isn't this front page news? Because it's so appalling. And also at the same time, you alluded to, we're all, on social media and comparing ourselves and, their life is better than mine. I just don't think anybody's got the time.
In my opinion, a lot of problems like this, if they hit people as being too hard, there's nothing I can do, they tend to stay as, well, there's nothing I can do, I'm not going to do anything. That seems to be, and that's one of the theories around the Parents with Questions campaign at the time was, here's something we can all do. We gave people tools to do it. What can be done? What are you doing about it? Let's talk about some of the solutions, because if it's a growing problem, that's the point. And as you said, it's an emerging thing. It's not going to go away in a hurry. It's getting worse. And the housing crisis in Australia is real for a lot of people, not just this cohort. But what can be done? Because presumably what you're doing can be applied and thought about across other cohorts in time as well. But talk us through your solutions and what you see as possible.
Yeah, cool. I set up Women for Homes 18 months ago, and a bit of context, I was a consultant, and I still am a consultant for firms and organisations that are looking to raise money for property projects with a focus on affordable and sustainable housing. And so when I was going out capital raising for those kinds of projects, the minimum investment was $50,000. And I was at an event, at a retreat actually with women, and it was a marketing and branding retreat. And when I was sharing what I was doing, I had women coming up to me saying, that sounds amazing. I'd love to get involved. How can I do that? What I realized, though, was that the income, the amount of money that I was raising for was not necessarily the amount of money that the majority of the women there would have access to. But I could really I really got that sense of that sort of wanting to do something. And if there was a way that it could be made easy for people, then they would certainly participate. So I spent a lot of time thinking about that and just came up with, well, yeah, look, this model works. We know that we can put money into affordable housing. I know that we need to have a structure that so that everyday investors can be part of that. So that's where I started thinking, and that's where I set up Women for Homes. And it was really about if we can provide a way that makes investing into affordable and sustainable housing really accessible for people, that's going to be a good thing. And the other thing that I knew as well, just to answer the question, why would somebody want to invest into affordable housing? My background before raising money for other developers was as a developer myself. I developed a 14 townhouse project, along with other projects, but the one that stood out for me was a 14 townhouse project where we were able to provide one-bedroom homes for an average price of 350,000 in an area where the median house price was 600,000. So it was the win-win. So for people, owner-occupiers that were buying into that, it was really great. They got in at a good rate and it was affordable for them. 3 of those homes were made available for a community housing provider, which meant that because of government subsidies, they could have people that were on very low incomes in there. So your social housing piece. And in terms of what that did for the community, you had something that was a really beautiful development, actually, that provided affordable housing and provided diversity of housing in that particular. So, and as an investor and the developer in that project, I made money as well. So I knew that both of those things could coexist. You can do well and you can do a good thing and you can make money as well. So I just wanted to find a way to do that, which is why I've spent that time focusing on affordable housing. So my argument there was that, well, in my world of raising money for developers and bringing in investors that already had a lot of money, that was great and they were doing a good thing. That was great impact. But also we could extend that impact by making the housing crisis and increasing the supply of affordable homes an everybody's solution rather than just the preserve of a few. And so that was really what I was aiming to do with Women for Homes, democratise the investment. And therefore, if it's an everybody solution and everybody can participate and everybody's going to make money as a result of doing it, then why wouldn't we just do that rather than waiting for the government or developers to fix it, because they're doing a pretty poor job, in my opinion.
That's, I like your angles. That's really opening this up, democratizing it and making it, people power can provide the solution, in other words. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cut you off
100%.
going, because this is the diversity piece around the housing is important. That's really stands out there. So, this is not about building, future slums. It's about creating some diversity in the supply chain in terms of housing being, everything's a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom type, AV Jennings type thing. Is it's sort of the standard offering, right?
Yeah.
Whereas what you're doing is creating something I'm hearing it's quality, beautiful, still appealing place to be, but it's just offering something slightly different to a cohort, an emerging cohort.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
What you just said there reminded me, I saw a picture of a suburb in Western Sydney. I think it was Western Sydney. And nothing against Western Sydney. I think this is repeated everywhere. But it was a new development and the renders for that were just house after house after house, all jammed up really close together. The facades were different, but it was just the same. And it made me want to vomit in my mouth, actually. I was like, how can people live like this? This is ridiculous. I get it that when somebody feels that they're locked out of housing, they're just going to take whatever they can get. But I just feel that we can be a lot more imaginative, much more creative, and actually build homes that elevate the human spirit rather than homogenization, because I don't think homogenization works for anybody.
Especially when you got, those homes you're talking about. I know I have the same feeling because we all feel like we lack connection and, access is one point, but also just living in a place where there's a sense of being part of a greater community. It seems to be, being eroded day by day. And yet every housing development seems to have 8-foot fences around it and small blocks, kids. There's no yard. There's no safe, inviting places for the kids to play or people to be outside interacting. But, you can lock the front door and call it your own and and log on to the internet to connect. It's like this. It's kind of inverted. It's all upside down and asked about, right?
Totally. And look, my son is coming 13, and the biggest challenge that I have for him at the moment is how to keep him entertained and off screens. So he actually doesn't have a phone at the moment, but he's really pushing for one. And I'm like, no, like there's got to be other stuff that you can do, which is not just sort of being on a screen, or go out and play basketball, or go to the soccer field, or whatever. And yeah, I agree with you. It's just we kind of have those small homes, or have those homes, lock the doors, and then everybody's inside, and everybody that's inside is not connecting with each other either because they're off doing their own thing.
Up
So
in their rooms. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're just, I can just see this loneliness epidemic. It's going to get to a point where it's really crushing everybody. That's what excites me about Women for Homes, actually, because it really is all about bringing community together to solve this problem. And when, as you know, Adam, when community comes together to solve something, so much can shift. And there's that. It's just a really beautiful human.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's not a new concept, right? I mean, I remember we lived in Bali years ago. It was, the Balinese build compounds. I mean, you're not allowed to build compounds in this country because it's, planning laws and all the other shit they put you through. But you didn't separate yourself from family. You created more housing around the central part of the, the interactive space. And you kind of, grandma was living over there and great granddad was over there, and the kids sort of interact with each other. It worked, and yet we do the opposite. So I
Yeah.
think, so talk us through so I've actually seen I can vouch for your development in Ocean Shores up in Northern Rivers. I had a friend of my daughter's living in one of those as a single mum, and the kids were friends. So I got to see that, and, it was beautiful. It was a very well thought out, it was kind of private but interactive. It wasn't like just a straight 6-pack block of units type feel. Wasn't like a 60s rehash. It was architecturally had significance to it, and the people there were very grateful for it. And it was lovely. But talk us through this current sort of bevy of or range of solutions you're offering via Women for Homes. What does the housing look like? Because presumably you don't want to create shitty houses that end up as the slums of tomorrow. We're trying to create some beauty and diversity at the same time as the solution.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, when we think about the housing continuum, so we look at how do we move people from crisis and transitional housing and social housing into affordable rentals, and then market rentals, and then owner-occupied homes, and then, even going all the way into end-of-life care. How do we move people through that continuum so that, you don't get Beryl and John, who have lived in this big old house forever and really want to downsize but can't because there's nowhere for them to move in the location that they are. So we want to avoid that. We want to free up housing supply as well as creating more homes. So the reason I mention that is because sometimes it's easy to get caught up in we just need to build lots of new stuff. Actually, we also need to consider better utilising what we already have and making that available for people. My vision for Women for Homes is that we're tackling as much as we can on that housing continuum. However, where we're starting is homes for older women. So co-living homes are basically 6-bedroom, 6-bathroom homes. Each bedroom has its own ensuite, kitchenette, courtyard. And so there's a mix of private space as well as communal space. And what I like about this model is if we get it right, and we're putting a lot of thought into how we get it right, is that it combats that sense of loneliness that happens as we age as well. And my whole tagline, because I've seen some co-living homes, it's a bit of a thing at the moment. There's lots of developers that are getting out there and doing it. And it's I can see how this could quite easily turn into the new NDIS, where developers are going in going, hey, you can make a mozza, Mr. and Mrs. Investor. And then they're just building the same old shitty old, buildings and cramming people in like sardines. So our point of difference is that the homes that we create are beautiful, affordable, and dignified. And so that's our agenda with our first pilot project. And I really wanted to do a pilot project first off to just say, well, yeah, look, we've done it with this brave group of women that have come together and said, yes, we will invest into this first home and we'll make it available for other women to live in. So the beauty of that is that they are going to get a good return. That's the target. And then the women that live there are going to pay an affordable rent.
Win.
And with bills and furniture included and making sure that it's affordable living and not just affordable housing, I think if we get that right, we've got a great model that we can scale. And like I said before, this is where we start because, number one, it's actually fairly easy to do in terms of planning laws. There's no development approval that's needed. There's certainly things that we need to do, and insurances and fire ratings and that sort of thing. But in terms of going and getting council approval, we don't need that. So that makes it easy.
So the co-living, just to explain that a bit further, I'm familiar and I've looked at it and I absolutely see it does bring that idea of the family compound I mentioned before. It kind of brings that idea back a bit where you do have your private space. You do have, you can close the door and shut the world out should you need to, but there's also, what's the interactive parts of that house? There's 6 bedrooms, each with a ensuite and kitchenette and so on in a courtyard. So there's private space, but what's the interactive element? Where are they
Where do
invited
people hang
to
out?
interact? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's the lounge and there's the kitchen, and both areas are large enough to be able to accommodate sort of the 6 women in the house. There's the outside space as well. So the outside space is in the garden. So in terms of the thought that we're putting into this, it's okay. Well, number one, how do we create community before anybody even moves into the house? And number two, how do we, in those communal spaces, how do we encourage that community and just, really make it so it's a great place to hang out if people want to. And also, there's the space to retreat if they want to. So there's no obligations on anybody. And then, in the garden, how do we landscape that to make it easy for women to be able to access that? The other thing to say is that in terms of what we're doing, we're really looking at making sure that women can age in place. So how do we make it accessible for the time that they move into the time that they might say, okay, well, now I need to go somewhere that, can provide a level of care.
Mm. Is there you mentioned that the cult, you didn't use the word culture, but the mindset, I guess, required to live in a semi-communal environment. Is there a challenge with that? Because it's something, as we alluded to, it's kind of been beaten out of us a bit. We get told you need to stand on your own 2 feet and own your own house and lock the front door and have your own thing. Interacting with people who, all under one roof effectively, what's been the experience? Because this isn't new. This has been going for a little while in Australia. What's the experience like? And what do you foresee as challenges, or the opportunities, I guess, are obvious, but what are the challenges and some of the things that we need to shift paradigm on for this to work well? Or is it working fine without any shift?
No, there's definitely some challenges. And, I've heard some nightmare stories from property managers of co-living homes. What I haven't heard from property managers of co-living homes is groups of older women being placed together. I haven't heard that. So I feel that this is something that's quite new. But what we got to think about as well is that these women that are coming in are going to have been used to living on their own, to having their own timelines and their own ways of doing things, their own quirks, all the things that make us human. So bringing a group of women together without paying attention to, well, how can we really support them to build that community and to be accepting of other people's quirks as well as be accepting of theirs, and how do we help that dynamic? So that's when I said before about how do we build community before they even arrive in the home, that's definitely something that we're paying attention to. The way I think of it, though, there's a couple of things that kind of spring to mind. When I was at uni and I was doing the whole share house thing, that was frustrating in some ways because there was always somebody that hoarded all of the cups. There was always somebody that left their dirty crockery in the sink. And we never had lockable doors. Whereas in this home, the co-living model that we're using, we will have cleaners, we will have gardeners. So that takes care of a lot, but also, that there is that responsibility. The other image that I have in my mind is that of the Golden Girls. Do you remember that TV show?
Yeah, yeah, I do. Yeah,
And
there's a model there.
there's a model there. There's a model there. And I'm sure they all got pissed off with each other at some point. I don't remember the show that well, but every once in a while I see the little memes and I'm like, yes, that's the thing. And when I think of, well, if I was in a situation where I needed to live in a co-living home and have sort of, if this was going to be my story and my journey, what would I want? I would want community. And, the other thing is, and I'm not writing off any of our husbands, but I look at my immediate group of girlfriends and I just go, I could live with them when I age. Like, do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, it would just be so much fun. Because
Have you
we've already
told
had
your
that.
husband and kids about this? You told them what they're
Like I said, I'm not trying to write them off at all. But because of that sense of community and because we understand each other's little quirks and because we've been vulnerable with each other and, all of those things. So to me, it's not a huge leap to say, okay, well, this can work for other people, but it's not something that can be foisted on people. It's definitely something that has to be built and they have to be willing to go there.
Gotcha. I want to dig in a little bit to your, why you're doing this and some of your story, because I find that really fascinating. I've known you on and off for a long time over the years. But before we do, just go into the pilot projects. Literally, like, this isn't conceptual now. We're really at the point of really ready to pull the trigger on the first home, first co-living home, and you've got a campaign running and a few things. So how do people get involved with this, and what's the next steps? Talk us through the practicalities and how you like people to support this, if that's the case.
Yeah, cool. So, look, if you're okay with me sharing the work that we're doing together, because I think that's important.
Sure.
So when you put out the call and said, anybody who would like to understand how to build a movement, I saw that and just jumped on it because I thought, well, yeah, I'm building a movement and I kind of know a little bit about what I'm doing, but also I'm flying the plane as I'm sort of falling out of the sky. So, yeah, to get some guidance on that would be really good. And one of the things that you challenged me on was really about making this an everybody solution. So where I was before we had the conversation was, it's just about the money. And then I realized through our conversation was that, well, actually everybody's got something to bring. Everybody's got skills or connections or time where they can do something as well as the money. And all of it is important. So that kind of has really opened up my viewpoint on what this movement looks like. And yeah, it has made my thinking way more inclusive than I actually thought it was. So that's what I'm really excited about. It's like, yeah, this really is a movement. Yeah, like it's not just about building homes, it's about bringing everybody in. So I just wanted to say that and also acknowledge I think we've had like a 2-hour session so far, and I'm like, wow, I'm just blown away by how much bigger I've been able to think about this with your support.
Awesome.
And then the other aspect of it is, yeah, we're pretty much funded. Like we've got a little bit of funding left to go for this first co-living home. So yeah, it's not a pie in the sky anymore. It's actually happening, which is really exciting. And in terms of where we go next, it's basically, okay, let's get this house built, let's get women in there, let's document this journey so that we can scale it later. And so my ask for people today is to come and join the movement and, look, whatever skills or time or resources you have, it's all important. So our website is women4homes.com. So www.women4homes.com/we are done. And the We Are Done campaign came from me being very intentional about putting content on social media about what we're doing. I run the Financially Empowered Women podcast. We have guest speakers come on each week and talk about different aspects of financial well-being for women. That's a good way to say it. And so it's been very intentionally putting more of that content out on social media and looking at what people were reacting to and commenting on. I realized that there was this really deep sense of injustice as to what's happening with all of the systemic barriers that I mentioned before. And because they were the posts that were really resonating. And I think it was you that said this, basically anger that isn't expressed, or anger that doesn't have a solution just stays as anger. And so I was like, well, yeah, we've got to be able to harness this in some way, working on the solution, which is providing homes for everybody. We're just starting with co-living homes for older women. That's where that's where we're kind of aiming for. And that's what we're inviting people to be a part of.
So how people can go to the website in that case, and presumably, if you're looking to invest in it, obviously there's something you can look at there as a pathway. If you want to become a resident and, you want housing for yourself, there's, I guess register your interest there. And then what else can people do if they care about this and haven't necessarily got the means or the willingness to invest? What are the pathways they can support you on? Just to clarify that.
Yeah, if they've got time, they can volunteer to share what we're doing. They can volunteer to do letterbox drops or something like that. So if people have got time and time that they can put into this, then we gratefully accept that. And if people have got connections and they think, okay, there's somebody here that could really unlock something that, that will help this movement continue and accelerate, are totally welcome, totally open to that. And if somebody's got skills, I had somebody reach out and say, I'm really good with PR and media. How can I help? Or a lawyer who said, yep, this is my background and I'm willing to support you in some way. So yeah, that it's that we need. And one of the things that I'm finding, having, oh gosh, 17 days into this campaign, one of the things that I'm finding is that there's actually a lot of work to do. And I've been very used to doing stuff on my own. And I'm like, yeah, all these people are showing up saying, how can we help? I'm like, yeah, we need some help now. There's definitely work to be done. And I don't know how big this can be. I think it's going to be quite big. So there's room for everybody who wants to contribute.
Exciting. Yeah. Well, that's a good indicator you're on the right track, and speaking to the zeitgeist, as we call it, speaking to the cultural moment where you do get the support from left, right and centre starts to flood in. So that's awesome. Well done. And so in terms of the first group home or co-living house is set to be in Victoria. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. In what region?
It's going to be regional. We haven't gone shopping for the property yet. I really wanted to get all the women together first, make sure we've got all the money, and then we can go shopping, because that's what women do really well. Ha ha ha. And yeah, so it's going to be regional Victoria. We know what price point we can pay for the property itself. We know that it has to be somewhere that is in an area where there's already facilities, close to shops, close to medical facilities, close to public transport. All of that is really important. And the developer that we're working with on this has a 100-point checklist that they use to assess the properties as well. So we're in really good hands in that sense, and we're going to end up with a really great property.
Awesome. And look, I can say, you probably shouldn't say this because it's financial advice or whatever, but I can look at this objectively and say, what you're offering is it's a real estate investment, so it's got that surety and security to it. The model is, as you pointed out, very fair to the residents and people living in the home, but also pretty attractive for investors. It's in double-digit returns. It's solid, and it's backed by a real asset. So it ticks a lot of boxes. And it's not so looking at it as an investment, it's not a charity investment. It's a well-intentioned impact investment with has a genuine, cultural impact, social impact with the security of property behind it. So, it does stack up.
Yeah. And I mean, just talking about that and the charity side of things, and because I often get asked, is this a charity? You're talking about ending homelessness. Is this a charity? And I really want to make the point that there is a role for charities to play, for sure, but this isn't charity. And the reason that I've intentionally backed away from that and made it a for purpose, for profit model is because I really understand that when you've got financial sustainability embedded into a model, then you can scale it. You cannot scale charity, which is just reliant on donations.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think it's regenerative economics make a lot of
Yeah,
sense in this regard. Yeah, if it's going to
yeah,
be, bigger than one project.
yeah.
So, and look, if people are listening out there going, gee, I'd love to have, either something, either as an investor or even as a potential resident or something, people would like this in their own hometown, in their own region. They can presumably express interest in that through the website also.
100%, yes. So when people go to the URL that I shared before, I probably should say it, shouldn't I? www.women4homes.com/we are done.
We
So
are done.
when everybody goes to that URL, there is a button that you press to say, yep, I take the pledge, I'm done. And on the next page after that, there is a number of ways that people are able to participate. And so we've got a little survey on that page, which just says, what skills would you like to bring? And yeah, and then we'll be able to see where everybody's zones of genius lie and then be able to call on people in that way.
Okay.
And thank you
Sorry,
for the
go on.
mention about the residents as well,
Yeah.
because we definitely wanted to capture that. We're looking, this is not just a one property and we're done. We're looking at how do we generate the money and the investment to do more of these types of properties. So anybody that puts themselves and says, yeah, I'd be interested in being a resident, we want to know where they're located so that when we've got a home in that area, we can call on them and just say, look, this is available.
Yeah. And look, this is, from what I've seen of you so far, Dionne, and how I've known you to be capable, I've zero doubt this will accelerate quickly. I think once the first, you said you call it a pilot, I'd call it a flagship. This flagship site gets built in the next couple of months. You're going to have this built and residents in there well before the end of the year. So this is going to happen quickly, and I would foresee the next one and the next one happening in pretty quick succession. So yeah, and for people who want to get involved, just to clarify, even just sharing this on social media and having people join in the campaign and making others aware, that's a pretty significant contribution for those listening if you want to get behind you. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Sharing is just one of the best things that can happen because the more people that we get this out to, we need to make this change. And, like we talk about movements as well, like in terms of what we're trying to do with housing, it can't be done with, a couple of people here and a couple of people there. We need a lot of people on board. And that's the exciting thing, because when we do come together, we're just unstoppable.
Look, a lot of these, yeah, and look, let's, I don't think I need to mention, but it's unlikely the government's going to rush in and fix it for us. They're making it worse. So this is where a social movement can make a big change, which is really what we're all about here. And I'd want to underline this is that this isn't a pie in the sky, hopefully this will happen one day project. This is funded, it's ready to go, and it's on the ground. It'll be first property is going to be selected and ready to go now. So I see a lot of projects, people come to me with all these ideas, but something that's already got this amount of traction and is going is, full credit to you. It
Thank you.
shows that it's real.
Yeah.
Tell
10
me,
years in the making.
yeah, I was going to say overnight success, right? When we first met, Dion, I just want to go back to you and why you'll be doing this and what drives you, because you talked about why it's important. But I first met you, I think, we were in Byron and the Byron Bay region, and you were doing a movement around hemp and back in those days. Yeah, we met years and years ago.
Jesus.
Yeah. You obviously forgotten me by then, but you made an impression on me, that's not an uncommon story. But like you've been stirring the pot and creating some social change in meaningful ways for a couple of decades at least. And
Yeah.
because you've seen the housing development you created, so dummy, you could clearly go make a lot of money doing other things, but you've chosen things that appear to be close to your heart. Talk us through why you do this stuff and why is this important to you personally And I'm going to ask you a bit about the blood nose theory of leadership as well. But dig into why it's important for you.
All right. So just going back to your point, I could make a lot of money doing something else. Yes. And I can think of lots of different points in my life where I've had the opportunity to jump into that and then pulled away. So my husband's from Jersey, and if you know anything about Jersey, you'll know that it's a bit of a tax haven, and it's an area where there's lots of financial services. And I got the offer to work for some bank or some financial institution, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't. Yeah, it just felt like I was selling my soul to the devil or something. It just didn't interest me. And the sort of types of people around that industry that I saw, like I just knew that if I went down that path, I wouldn't be in integrity with myself. I then, a few years later, I came to Australia, did a PhD, and that was brilliant. That was, doing a PhD in sugarcane chemistry and looking at medicines from sugarcane. But I got really disillusioned with academia. I really saw myself in academia. I really did. I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a professor by the time I'm 40. Like, if nothing else, I've got ambition, right? But then I heard a story from my supervisor, and I knew it was important at the time, but I didn't realize how important until the work that I'm doing now. And she told me that she'd worked at all of these prestigious universities. She'd worked at Harvard. She'd worked all across the world. And she didn't have any superannuation. She was ill and she had health issues, and she couldn't leave her job to get better because she had no superannuation. And this woman was ready to retire 5 years ago. So the other thing that she said was, don't get yourself so caught up in the treadmill that you finish your PhD, do 2 or 3 postdocs, and then get to your 40s and not have children. And so I think that was the catalyst for me to go, okay, well, when I finish this, I'm going to have children, and then I'm going to figure out what I want to do next. So that definitely left an impression on me, just thinking, well, what I thought was job security wasn't actually job security, and seeing colleagues that were on 3-year contracts and then their contracts being torn up, and just saying, okay, you've got to move on, and the insecurity that left for them. So that was another pivot point for me. I could have stayed in academia, but I just got the real sense of, no, this isn't for you. So then when I had kids, I realized that actually I was kind of back in the same situation as when I grew up. So I grew up, my parents didn't have a lot of money. They were both working full-time, working really hard. Part of, sort of my family in Jamaica, so I've got Jamaican heritage, and there's a strong Christian faith that goes with that. So I realized, and again, this is hindsight, I didn't know this at the time, but I realized at that point, my worldview was, okay, well, if we're going to be in service and if we're going to help other people, then we're not going to have much money. That was the connection that I made.
Mm.
When I was home with my kids, my husband was working, which was great, but we didn't have enough to buy a home. So I figured that, if I wanted to play the game of property, then I had to learn how to do it. And I'm good at learning. So we went and did, mentoring courses and things. And so that was my first break in terms of getting a joint venture partner, realizing about resources. He had the money resource. We had the time resource. We worked together. We created something. We both got paid. It was like, this is great. Let's keep doing that. And then doing that affordable housing project, again, I got to see that making money and doing good was, you could do both. And so for me, that kind of came full circle of, I had this belief that I couldn't do that. And then I had an experience where I could. And that was pivotal for me. And so when I got the opportunity to work with a developer who said, yeah, will you help me raise capital? I was like, yeah, absolutely. But I'm not going to do it if it's for just some, luxury townhouses.
Mm.
I'm only going to do it if it's affordable housing, because now I know that I can do this and I can make this work. So it's that sense of service that is really strong. Service without the religious dogma, but that sense of service is really strong, and also understanding that I can make money through doing that as well. And if I can do it, then other people can too. And I wrote the book, Ethical Property Investing, How People Can Make Double-Digit Returns Through Investing in Affordable and Sustainable Homes. And I really believe that if collectively we have this mindset shift, we will not have a housing crisis and we will not have homelessness. And so that is my mission, actually, to push that as far as possible. And what I realized was I can't just say it, I've got to show it.
Love it. I just love how you've joined the dots on all those things and, can be of service as well as have the financial aspect of it, not just limping along, but also thriving and creating that opportunity for others. So you've really created this ecosystem around this, which I think is superb. And, full credit to you for actually stepping out and following through on these things. This is the sort of thing that a lot of people talk about and argue about and, talk about at dinner parties or whatever and do nothing about. And you've actually joined the dots to make it happen in real time. So I just, hats off to you for it.
Thank you.
And, like you said, it's it's at the point of solving a major problem and creating a solution, which is transcendent in its nature. I talk about this with that Build the Movement workshop we ran last week or the week before. Is it the best? There's no point in having a protest. A protest is a moment in time, but creating a solution to the problem becomes an institutional answer. It becomes its own institution. I think that's what you're doing here is you're creating a legacy piece which can exist to make the old problem obsolete, if that makes sense. What's the Buckminster Fuller quote you used in your webinar? It keeps escaping me.
Yeah. So something along the lines of there's no point in railing against the existing system. To change something, create a new system that makes the old one obsolete.
Beautiful. I'm going to let you go, Dionne. Just hats off to you for what you're doing with this project, Women for Homes. It's very exciting in terms of seeing it happen. It's exciting because it shows what's possible, and it's, profoundly important that we're looking after, as you said, the elders of the village, a cohort of people that, shouldn't have to worry about this at this stage in life. And, I say that stage, it's, talking over 55, I'm one of them. My kids drive past these over 55 homes and threaten to put me into them. Hopefully it's a joke, but yeah, it is important that, we recognise that this is a real thing. And I just love what you're up to, and I love the fact you've got a movement around it, and you're empowering people to make a solution, even if it's sharing a social media meme and, saying, yes, we're done, or it's, getting involved as an investor, or even getting involved in helping make something happen in your community. So I would put this out to those listening as my call out is if you'd like to see this happen and you can see the importance of this in your particular part of the world, particularly in Australia, obviously, go and join Dionne's movement, get involved and see if you can be the leader in your community to help spearhead one of these projects. Don't overrule the concept that, you can make a fundamental difference in your region in this space if it's important to you. And I know that what Dionne's producing and creating, is potentially you can harness that energy and help replicate it in your region by being a leader in your space. And stop me, Dean, if I'm being presumptuous there, but I really can foresee a lot of people out there going, yeah, I want to see this happen. I'm going to get behind it. I'm going to get people together. I'm going to start spreading the word and see it happen in their region. Is that a fair call? Is that a fair
100%. Yeah. Because this is something that spreads from other people sharing it and other people taking the initiative as well. I feel like I've kind of got to the limit of what I can do by myself, and it's definitely okay. Come on board because we've got work to do.
Awesome.
In a very joyful way, I should say.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's not a negative thing. It's a fully positive thing about creating solutions, which is what I love about it. Well, what you're up to is inspiring. Thank you for your leadership and your vision and your energy and the risks you take to get it to this point. Good luck with the next few months.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm enjoying, we've just started working together, just to be clear for everyone. And as I'm sort of working here as a strategic partner with Dionne, and it's just inspiring to be a part of. So I look forward to being part of that journey. But in the meantime, full kudos to you. Thanks for everything you're doing.
Thank you. And thank you so much for your support.